Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Gambles, and welcome back to their full card breakdown. This time for UFC 293, we are back in Australia, over there in Sydney for another pay-per-view. We've been kind of all over the world recently with Singapore, Paris, and now Sydney. It seems like we have ourselves another good fight night at hand, and another one that is stacked with 12 fights that seem to make up for a pretty good DraftKings and betting slate. As always, though, we're going to break down each one of these 12 fights from a DraftKings and a betting perspective. Should be timestamped down below, so please do me the favor, hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel. This is the best time of year. You know, you got Dana White Contender Series, which will be live on my channel again Monday. It's the start of the NFL season. Who knows? Maybe we'll do some content there. You know, I got to rock the Bills hat too. But not only that, and the fact that we're approaching the end of this MMA year, which is going to be stacked with some fun fight cards. We're almost at 1,000 subs. I would love to hit that down below. So please tell your friends, show some love. And what we have here is a pretty fun card to break down. Let's not waste any more time. Let's do this. We get the night started with the 8-2 Kevin Jousset versus the 10-3 Kiefer Crosbie. And on first glance, it looks like we have a battle of the Australian City Kickboxing Camp in Jousset versus SPG Ireland McGregor Camp there in Kiefer Crosbie. But you dive in a bit deeper, and these guys both have a pretty exciting skill set. I do think it's a lower level matchup, but one that'll bring definitely entertainment here. And although I don't know if I want my money on this from a betting perspective, their electric styles may lead to some decent DraftKings scores. And being a very close fight, this is one we're going to have to look into a bit further. Jousset has some kickboxing experience. I do think he's going to be the more technical fighter of the two. Good cardio, good durability, super tough. He showed that in his loss to Jack Della Maddalena. Maybe susceptible to some damage, but has the ability to use his range, use his physicality, and go out there and be pretty technically sound over 15 minutes. On the flip side of things, we do have Crosbie, not spelt the right way, but still a guy who's going to go out there, bring a fun pace, and he does have some boxing experience, but in my eyes, he's more reckless. He wants that dogfight. He wants things to get dirty, and he may have success doing so, but a lot of the time, going as crazy as he does, he leaves himself open to be hit. He does slow down the stretch, and although he does have some good offensive wrestling, I do think there's going to be a lack of physicality here, all leading me to pick towards the side of Kevin Jousset from a pick perspective. I think Jousset is going to have the physicality edge, the cardio edge, and most importantly, the technicality edge on the feet, and what should be a very fun fight. The problem is, if Crosbie is succeeding, it's going to be a very grimy fight, lack of technicality, a dogfight, if you will, and that kind of favors the Crosbie side of things. I do think his win condition is rooted in a sloppy, early finished fight here on the Crosbie side of things. Overall, though, pick perspective, I think Jousset gets it done in front of his, let's say, home crowd here because he is training in Australia. But I do think he has all the tools to succeed, and I do think that he has more chances to win this fight overall. But when it comes to my drafting side of things, I don't mind Crosbie here. Like I said, his win condition is largely rooted in early success and in making it a dogfight, which includes a ton of volume, maybe some takedowns, and I do think he has decent finish potential, which leaves him for a good GPP play at 7.8K. Flip side of things, if Jousset's going to have success, it's probably going to be down the stretch, maybe a late finish over Crosbie, maybe throwing in some judo tosses, something like that, but largely rooted in the striking, which doesn't leave him to be as appealing of an option, especially with all the high drafting scores we have on the slate, but also someone who's live. So I do think this fight is a pivotal one to target from DraftKings perspective, mostly due to their salary range and the way this fight could play out. I don't think it's a must-have, however, I think it is a very important one to look into, pick your side of things, and if you are on the Crosbie side of things, it is a very good underdog to target this week. With that being said, give me Jousset, give me his technicality and kickboxing to win a, let's say, a late finish or a pretty dominant decision in front of the Australian crowd. And then we get to another Australian, 13-7 Shane Jung, 16-6 Gabriel Miranda, and this is a very fun fight, one where I'll definitely be looking to target the under. Let me get that out of the way because I do think we have two fighters here who bring polarizing matchups to the table and polarizing styles that could lead to a fun fight. On one side of things, you have Shane Jung, a guy who I don't rate too highly, but you have to admit is very well-rounded, has some good kickboxing in his own right, has the home crowd behind him, and is someone who is favored in this matchup against Gabriel Miranda, who's just all action. Not only does he have a great mustache, but he also has a very good finishing record. All 16 of his wins have come under a round and a half, and he seems to be that killer to be killed fighter, right? He likes to go out there, bull rush his opponents, take him down, and on the mat, he is just a violent finisher from top position. And that's kind of where this under is rooted from. I don't think Shane Jung is necessarily a huge finisher, but a guy Miranda who has been finished in losses, whose striking is very questionable, who cardio dumps after a round and a half, you might be able to think that Shane Jung could have some late success. But I'm not writing out Miranda here. I do think he was brought in to give a setup win for Bonas Maitani, but I'm not taking much from that matchup. I do think Miranda has a decent skill set to go over there and exploit the poor ground game of Shane Jung. I mean, Shane Young was taken down by Blake Builder, taken down twice by Omar Morales, taken down by Alexander Volkanovski 5 times. I'm not comparing Miranda to Volkanovski, but what I'm saying is if we're giving a lot of success towards the ground game of Miranda, and we've seen Steve Young take it down before, it could correlate to some early fight ending potential for Miranda. Now, of course, if he can't get him out of there early, if he exploits a lot of energy going for those takedowns and not really being able to hold down Steve Jung. I've been saying Steve Jung, it's Shane Young, my bad. I guess the football's getting to me, and I know Steve Jung ain't playing, but football season's around the corner, fellas. Shane Young, though, if Shane Young's able to survive that early onslaught, I do think he's able to take over the fight goes, is the much more technical kickboxer, and I do think has the better cardio as well as a crowd behind him. So in my eyes, it's probably Miranda early, Young late, leading us towards a good under to target, but also a pretty good DraftKings side of things. Gabriel Miranda, 7.6 count DraftKings. His win condition is largely rooted in round one success, to which he was able to have some early success against Benoit Saint-Denis. I mean, the first minute, landed a takedown, landed some control time, looked decent, and then he couldn't overpower a guy who's as strong as Saint-Denis is. Now you got a guy in Shane Young who can be taken down, can be controlled. Miranda's path to victory is there. It's an early finish on the mat, and I do think he's able to get it. And I know it's really hard to trust the guy with his lack of defensive striking, his cardio. I do think he has the style of fighting to go out there and have success against Young. Flip side of things, 8.6 for Shane Young. He scored 122 in his only finished win inside the UFC so far. I do think that his condition here is to finish Miranda as he tires on the stretch. He could go out there score very well. This is a fight I really like to target. I want him taking the under. And one where might be taking the dog to spoil the Australian crowd's hopes early on. Oh boy. Next up, 3-2, Blood Diamond versus the 7-3 Charlie Radtke, another big favorite. And, you know, Blood Diamond hasn't necessarily had the most success in the UFC. I mean, he's only 3-2, got steamrolled by Wells, and then lost a close fight to Orion Kosi. A guy in Blood Diamond who lacks a very pivotal part of MMA, and that's a ground game. On the feet, sure, he has a ton of power, but he's been facing these guys who can out-grapple him here, and now he faces a guy in Charlie Radtke who does have some good jiu-jitsu, who is a competent striker in his own right. I don't think Charlie Radtke's that bad of a fighter, and I do think this is another poor matchup for Blood Diamond. Radtke making his debut. He does have 7 wins, 5 of them coming inside the distance, 2 of them by submission, which is what you want to see against a guy in Blood Diamond, but he's not the most proactive grappler, and maybe in this fight he could be, but he does have good enough striking where he doesn't really have to rush the takedowns. He is able to compete on the feet, but his submission game is no joke. I do think he has some good grappling. He's able to have some success here. The problem is here is if we're looking at a way to back Blood Diamond, not only is he in front of a home crowd facing a debutant who's making the trip overseas, but we've seen Radtke knocked out. That's definitely a possibility and one that could play into playing the under here, but not necessarily one I can back at a high clip. I do think that the discrepancy in the ground game is much larger than the discrepancy in the feet, and I do think Radtke can contend in the striking, but on the mat it's no question. The Blood Diamond may be improving that takedown defense. I think he only needs one here for Radtke to take him down, move to dominant position, be able to submit him here. I do think Radtke's the rightful favorite, and this is another fight you want to target on DraftKings. At 9.1K, Radtke has round 1 finish potential. He has takedown upside. He has some decent striking upside, and is a guy who I see winning this fight a lot of the time. He's one of my favorite GPP plays this week, and I do think he has some success. Flip side of things, what's Blood Diamond's win condition? It's starching him. And although it's not impossible, it's not too likely in my opinion. I can't rely on that too much of the time, which is why I'm picking Radtke. But I mean, a couple of years ago, he was knocked out by a guy called Justin Montalvo, second round KO. That is something that could be live for Blood Diamond. Radtke's chin is not perfect, so I guess the path to victory and GPP ownership is there for Blood Diamond. However, not something I want to trust at a high clip. Instead, much more comfortable with the huge grappling edge for Radtke up top, and I do think he gets it done. Next up, 14-5, Nasrat Haqparast versus the 7-1-1 Landon Quinones. Very interesting matchup to have here. Not one I'm too thrilled about, to be completely honest, but one where we do have ourselves a large favorite, a guy, Nasrat Haqparast, who's been around for a while, a guy who I like to go out there and support, but a guy who's a very good boxer, very durable in his own right as well, I think, and who has the ability to mix in the ground game, but considering his good volume, his good technicality in his hands, he's content with keeping it upright. Now, he's 6-3 in his last 9, and, that's not always the best record, but those 3 losses are coming to Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, and Drew Dober. Those are things where I can forgive you for those. Those are things where I can still get behind you at this clip. And when you're facing a guy in Quinones who's going to be a huge step down in competition, a guy who just lost on The Ultimate Fighter, I understand why the price tag is where it is. With that being said, though, I don't necessarily think Quinones is that bad. I think he has a good work rate. I think he has good determination. I like his forward pressure, but there's no question about it that Haqparast is going to have the ability to piece him up from the outside. I think his boxing is way superior towards the likes of Quinones here. And although Quinones might go for takedowns, I like the takedown defense of Haqparast, and I think that Haqparast might have the ability to land takedowns of his own, cementing these rounds. And the problem I have here is I don't think I can trust Haqparast to get too much of a finish because he is more so a volume guy, war of attrition, that kind of thing. And for that reason, it's hard to back him at 9.5K. But considering how much Quinones gets hit, considering how much volume Nasrat's going to put out there, I wouldn't put him past here. It makes it a very tough fight to bet from either angle because I'm not too certain at which method of victory Haqparast gets it done. And I don't know that if he lives off his price tag. I mean, if he takes him to decision, it could be a close fight considering the work rate of Haqparast. Considering the work rate of Quinones, makes it pretty sloppy. I do think Haqparast get it done. I don't know if I can get to him at 9.5 because he's never scored above 100 points. He's only scored above 80 points twice At 9.5K, can't really get to him. Much prefer a lot of the fighters in this range. This seems to be a pass fight from DraftKings, but one I think Haqparast can get done quite easily. And we keep it moving with the 16-6 Jamie Mullarkey versus the 18-8 John the Bull Makdessi. Fighting out of Canada. There we go. Get ourselves a Canadian scrapper on this one, but one where the market's kind of in and out on Jamie Mullarkey, right? Favorite last time against Namath, big one at that, dropped the ball, and now he comes out here, hefty favorite price tag again, and Mullarkey's a guy with a pretty good skill set, but not someone who I can keep trusting at this big price tag. I mean, he has been bonked before, he fights in these close fights, not always to the best of his abilities, but there are a lot of things to like in this matchup. I think he's the more physically imposing fighter, the guy who can implement his takedown upside, a guy who's the younger fighter fighting in front of his home crowd. The stars align for Mullarkey, and I understand why he's a favorite in this spot, though. The problem I have here is, although Mullarkey's going to have the much better hand speed, and although he's going to have the ability to probably win the optics in the striking exchanges here, it won't be by a large margin. And I don't think his takedown upside can go out there and control Makdessi, because no one really controls Makdessi to that much of an extent. Instead, what I see happening is a 15-minute boxing affair where, sure, Mullarkey's going to get the better of the exchanges, but one that's not where he's going to run away with it or live up to a minus 250 price tag. Instead, one where, yeah, he's probably going to win the fight, but in a close boxing affair, Makdessi's going to have the opportunity to land at his own right. And although Makdessi's an older fighter, still has good cardio, still has good durability, it should be a close one. And if I see that happening, if I see Makdessi stifling the takedown upside, stifling the finish potential of Mullarkey, Mullarkey's another guy at 8.9K I don't want too much of. Sure, he scored 127 and 109 in 2 of his wins, but those are fights where he ends them early. In his 2 wins where he went to decision, he scored 81 and 69. I don't think he's able to do that here against Makdessi, a guy who is willing to exchange, but a guy who kept Ignacio Bahamonde at bay, a guy who only allowed 78 points to Nasrat Haqparast last time out. I think that Makdessi is able to stifle that and make it for a poor scoring win for Mullarkey, not living up to that 8.9K price tag. So that being said, I'm still going to pick Mullarkey, not with too much confidence and not when I want too much on DraftKings. I think Makdessi is a fine cash underdog at 7.3, just because I do see this fight going to decision a lot of the time. However, not too much I want too much of investment on. There are some better straps here. Including this next one, we have the 12-2 Jack Jenkins, 14-6 Kape Mariscal. Super fun fight. Jenkins a guy I'm really high on. Bet him as a huge dog his last time out. Not going to comment on the decision, but he got it done nonetheless, and now he's in front of his home crowd, facing Kape Mariscal, a guy who was super game to fight Trevor Peek and who impressed in that matchup. However, going from someone in Trevor Peek to Jack Jenkins is just complete polar opposites here. Jack Jenkins is a technical specialist who's very well rounded in my opinion, who does have holes in his game, but not only is he going to be fighting in front of his home crowd, but he's going to have tons of levels to this MMA game that Trevor Peek didn't show Mariscal. And we capped Mariscal last time. He's a guy who has fought great level of competition, has competed in them, but has fallen short as well. Can be knocked out in his own right, can be taken down, can be out-volumed, and these are things that Jack Jenkins is definitely going to try to bring to the table. I think Jenkins has the opportunity to keep using his powerful leg kicks from the outside, which is his favorite weapon, as well as potentially mix in takedowns to go over there and threaten a guy in Mariscal in front of his home crowd. I love how well-rounded Jenkins is. He has the ability to mix this up wherever the fight goes, and I think he's going to be landing the more impactful shots in front of his home crowd. That's going to send the crowd into an eruption here. Jenkins is a guy the UFC is trying to promote. He's a fan favorite on the come up, and I do think he gets another win in front of his home crowd. He has knockout power against a guy in Mariscal who has been knocked out before. However, I don't think that's his only win condition. I do think he can win minutes by a multitude of ways, and for that reason, I don't know how I'm going to get to this fight from a betting perspective. I do think Jenkins wins. I think the line is about right, and if I can't promise a knockout win for Jenkins, does he live up to his price tag? I mean, at 8.7 in his 2 wins, he scored 97 and 64. He's not necessarily a huge volume guy, and although he has takedown upside, it could be a slower affair that goes to decision. I do think there are better options in this price range, which is why I'm not necessarily going to him. But I do think he wins this fight at a high clip, and considering his durability and stuff like that, also a good cash play. Mariscal, I like his volume. I guess he could have some takedown upside in his own right against a guy in Jenkins who can be taken down, but I think there are better underdogs. Talk about Miranda. We'll talk about some others coming up as well. To me, it's another fight to sit back and enjoy, and I do think all the upside lies with Jack Jenkins, and for that reason, going to be picking him, cheering for the Australian in front of his home crowd, and I do think he gets it done for us. Another favorite I'm looking to back. Then we get to the featured prelim. We have Carlos Ulberg 8-1 versus Jung 15-4-1. Carlos Ulberg, guys. He's the guy who, for some reason, my girlfriend wanted to watch him fight. The part-time model. The guy who, you know what? You can't have both of them, right? You can't be a really good fighter and a model. I'm neither of those, so I just sit behind a screen and talk fights. And this is one where, although I'm jealous of his looks, I'm even more jealous of his fighting ability. This guy is a very good kickboxer, very powerful, and he's been on the come up for a long time now. This is why he's in the featured prelim, right? He's a guy that's looking to showcase in front of his home crowd. Good looking dude, a guy with a lot of power and who can be fun to watch. And now he's getting a guy here, Jung, who has been knocked out, who was bullied last time against Clark, and who hasn't really been on the best streak. And this is the case where we have a fighter in Ulberg who I've already parlayed. I parlayed him last week at Shariaya. Now I have 3 units on Ulberg at -132, and I do like him to win this fight at a very high clip. He's going to be the much better kickboxer, a ton of power, has the ability to knock out Jung at any point of this fight, as well as some decent cardio. Yes, it didn't look good against Kennedy and Jakwu, but that's because he unloaded everything. If he hits Jung with those same things, Jung will be asleep way earlier than that. Now, here's the red flag, is the takedown defense. We haven't seen Ulberg too much on the ground. Jung did land a bunch of takedowns against William Knight. That's William Knight, a guy who doesn't fight with the best training camp, a guy who doesn't have the best game plan either, and a guy where outside trips like that were able to work at a high clip. I think Ulberg's going to see that going. He's fighting out a very good fight camp and has the physicality to own Jung in those grappling exchanges. Now, of course, the win condition for Jung is going to score phenomenal because it's going to include takedowns, it's going to include stifling that offensive Ulberg. And at 7K, it's going to score very well. But on the feet, there's no comparison. Jung's the same guy who went to a draw with Sam Alvey. He's the same guy who was knocked out in a minute and a half by Dustin Jacoby, a guy who I think doesn't have as much power as Carlos Ulberg. So I think Ulberg has round 1 finish potential. I think he has the ability to win judges scorecards as well. And in front of his home crowd, I do think that energy is going to boost him here. I do think he's one of my favorite fighters on this card. I do think he should win at a very high clip. At 9.2 in his last win, he scored 105, 105, 105. Pretty consistent, and I like that. Those are 3 first-round finishes. I think he gets another here. Another guy I'm looking at target at 9.2. Another guy I think wins at a high clip. Give me Carlos Ulberg. And then we get on to the main card. 9-4 Tyson Pedro, 8-2 Anton the Pleasure Man Turkalij here. This one where we got a lot of line movement, where we get all these breakdowns. This is maybe the most important fight of the card in my eyes for DraftKings. I know it's a bold claim, but I do think you have to get the right read on this one. Because if we look at a guy in Tyson Pedro, a guy who the public is kind of down on, a guy who's got some tailor-made matchups recently. When he finally faced adversity in Makdessi Bukauskas, he struggled. And what we have here, a guy in Tyson Pedro, is a guy who, if this fight leaves the first round, he's never won a fight that's left the first round. He's a ton of first-round finish upside. All 9 of his wins have come in that very first round, and he's super explosive. Good ground game, great leg kicks. He has the abilities to win this matchup in the very first round. There's no question about that. But what he's facing is a guy in front of him in the Pleasure Man, Anton Turkalij, who is not a good athlete, who is not a good fighter by any means, but who's extremely durable, has great pace, and even better cardio. These guys are polar opposites. You have a very good technician in Pedro who fades after round 1. You have a very horrible technician and pretty bad athlete in Turkalij who thrives after round 1, who likes to drown his opponents. And that kind of makes it for a very polarizing matchup. And I will admit, I did take some plus money on Turkalij because, as my good friend Liam says, ABCs, you always bet on cardio, and I do think he has the advantage here. With that being said, who wins round 1 at a high clip? It's Tyson Pedro, and then I think it's Turkalij taking over as the fight goes on, potentially getting a late finish or winning in the judges' scorecards, which is why I took the plus money. DraftKings-wise, this could be pretty fun, right? On one side of things, Tyson Pedro, when he's winning in round 1, dude, this guy's scoring insane. 102, 108, 116, 109. If he wins this fight, it's going to score very well, and I do think he has the ability to finish Turkalij. But if he can't, if this fight gets out of round 1, it's going to be Turkalij who's spamming takedowns, who averages 7 takedowns for 15 minutes. And although who only lands 1.6 strikes per minute, his takedowns are at a high clip that could score well on DraftKings. I'm picking Turkalij to take over as the fight goes on. However, I truly do think this is a 50-50 fight. Can Pedro get him out of there early? Has he improved that gas time? Because if this fight is at cardio parity, Pedro rolls it. Pedro's a much better technical fighter. The problem is it's not. Turkalij's going to take over the fight goes. For that reason, I did take the plus money, but super close fight. Gun to my head, I'll bank on cardio. I'll take Turkalij, but super close one. Probably have more ownership on DraftKings of Pedro because of his first-round finish upside. Super pivotal matchup. I am looking forward to it. Keeping her moving with the 6-3 Justin Tafa, 12-3 Austin Lane. We saw this fight happen before, ended by eye poke. The breakdown stays the same. Austin Lane is a guy with a ton of physicality here, but whose biggest red flag is his durability, and he has been knocked out in his losses before, and Justin Tafa's a guy who brings a ton of power, and now the tables flip, right? It was in Austin Lane's hometown of Jacksonville. It's now in Justin Tafa's. Tafa's going to have the huge power and durability upside and have his home crown behind him. I do think the most likely outcome is Justin Tafa gets that knockout. But do I want to lay that -200, -250 price tag on it? Probably not, because Austin Lane's going to have the height and reach advantage here. He's going to have the immeasurables. He's going to have the physicality edge, and he could potentially land takedowns. The problem is I think it's only a matter of time before Tafa finds that chin. And I do think it comes early, and for that reason, this is another fight you want on DraftKings. If we're just mentioning how Lane can be dropped by all these shots, how his chin's not the best, and we're saying how, well, Tafa's got round 1 knockout upside. His last 3 wins in the UFC, his only 3 wins in the UFC, have come by round 1 knockout, scoring 104, 103, 103. then I want Justin Tafa this week. 9K. Badman's a guy who I think is going to go out there, find that finishing blow in Austin Lane, and this time it won't come via eye poke. Flip side of things, Austin Lane, I mean, this fight's supposed to end in the first round, and I understand why, which is kind of why you want to have some Lane as well. This fight is another pivotal one on DraftKings, so it is expected to end inside the distance. It is with a lot of variance, but one where I'm taking Justin Tafa to get it done. However, the underdog's live in Lane if you need that salary relief at 7.2K. However, the pick is Tafa. I do think he fans the off switch of Lane, his durability, his power, his home crowd. That's all going for him this week. Keeping it rolling with the 18-6 Manel Kape versus the 7-0 Felipe dos Santos. And how crazy is that? You're going from fighting for a contract on Dana White Contender Series to being the third fight on a pay-per-view. I mean, that's an incredible step up in competition, but also a tall task for Felipe dos Santos, a guy who I was going to back on Dana White Contender Series, who I do think has a decent skill set, finding out to shoot the box with the blonde hair and all that stuff going for him, but who's facing a killer here in Manel Kape. There are levels to this game, and simply put, I think Manel Kape shows that this weekend. Felipe dos Santos is a guy who goes forward with reckless abandon. I do think he has a very solid ground game. I do think he has a very solid power and pressure and cardio and volume, but a guy who can be taken down, a guy who walks forward with reckless abandon, who can be hit, and all those things are not things you want to do against Manel Kape. Manel Kape is a violent man. At first, the risk was he wasn't throwing his hands enough. Now that he is, he's a threat, man. He bullied David Dvorak on the mat, something I think he could do here against Felipe dos Santos. He absolutely ran through Zalga Zalmagoulas. Something I think he can do here as well. And all the signs are posting towards Manel Kape. The guy has incredible hand speed, great volume, amazing cardio, good durability, and some solid wrestling to back. Yes, Felipe dos Santos has a decent career ahead of him. I think he has some solid upside here, but too much, too soon. This is a solid fight from Manel Kape to go out there, continue to rise to the top. It's a big step down from Kai Kara France to Felipe dos Santos, and I think Kape exemplifies that. 9.3K, I like him more than Haqparast. I like him more than Mullarkey, but at 7-0, we haven't really seen dos Santos get knocked out yet. So to me, there are a lot of things we have to take into account here. He could just have another dominant performance like he did against Dvorak. We're only scored 71. Is that going to outscore Ulberg? Is that going to outscore Radtke? So many things to take into consideration here. I love Kape from a cash play perspective and from a very high floor, but it's going to be interesting to see how I target this fight from a GPP perspective, considering the unknowns with dos Santos. Do you think Kape wins at a high clip? I want more exposure of him than to the dos Santos side, because I do think Kape gets his hand raised at a very high clip this weekend. Should be a fun matchup. Give me Manel Kape. And then the co-main event, 15-5 Tai Tuivasa, 36-10 Alexander Volkov. Tai Tuivasa, Shuivasa in his hometown, big underdog. Sign me up. Simply put, plus 200 Tai Tuivasa. I will get there any day of the week. To me, we have a guy in Alexander Volkov who will have the range, who will have potential grappling upside, but he's a guy who's kind of slowing down as the fights goes on. A guy who did not look very good against Tybura, against Aspinall, and although he's got some favorable matchups against Romanov, against Rosenstrike, he's facing a guy here in Tuivasa who is finally taking the right time off, who's a huge hype train, and is someone who the crowd's going to be behind this weekend. And if this was a 50-50 fight on the money line, if it was -110, sure, Volkov has the range, has the ability to keep Tuivasa at bay, win a mostly boring decision. But when Tai Tuivasa is as durable as he is, when he has the knockout power he has, and we've seen Volkov knocked out before, I think I'm going to take the dog here in Tuivasa. He's going to have the crowd rallying behind him. He's going to be landing the more impactful shots in a 3-round event where he has the cardio to push a pace on Volkov and look to land that kill shot at any time. I think he also has the judges be able to sway him, landing the moments versus the minutes here against Volkov. So give me Tuivasa. I'm happy he took the time off, and you know what? It's hard to discredit him for being knocked out by Ganin Pavlovich, because who isn't at this point? And those are coming off of really short distances between the two. So now that he's rested, now that he has the home crowd behind him, now that he's facing an older, declining fighter in Volkov, in my opinion, I think Tuivasa gets him out of there. Someone get this man a shoe. I like him as an underdog, and on DraftKings, he is definitely someone I want to target. 7.4K, he may be my favorite underdog because, you know what, he has knockout upside. In his wins, he scored 130, 104, 99, 95, 118. His upside is there. I do think he has knockout power. I do think he is going to have the hand speed advantage and the crowd rallying behind him. I do think he's a very, very fun underdog to target this week. And him, along with Miranda, allow for a ton of upside. Very good GPP play. However, considering the fact that Volkov kind of pitter-patter and stay away, mostly GPP, I think they're better cash underdogs in this slate. Flip side of things, Volkov, do I see him finishing Tuivasa? Not too often for that reason. I can't get to him above the Tafas or Jenkins or Radtkes, and for that reason, there are better plays in the slate. However, considering this fight's expected to end inside the distance, potentially you want to have a little bit of exposure to him in GPP. However, I'm much heavier in the dog this week. Give me Tuivasa. And then we get to the main event, 24-2 Israel Adesanya, 27-5 Sean Strickland. Let's address a few things here. One, what are we going to hear at the Press conferences this week. What kind of stuff is Sean Strickland going to say? That's number one. Number two, since when is Sean Strickland fighting for a belt? What would the world come to if he won? And number three, Sean Strickland has a girlfriend. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw that clip. He does. He's taking her around Australia. Good for her. Hopefully she's okay. Blink twice if you needed help. But this is such an interesting matchup. Like, of course, Israel Adesanya is to be favored. There's nothing else to describe it that way. They fight it. They both want to stay on the feet, and at that, he's a much more technical fighter, a guy with a lot more power, a guy who just should style on Sean Strickland. And I understand the line is where it is. But because we have such a wide line, I'm looking for ways to play the underdog here. Let's put it that way. And I think if we look at the way these guys could match up here, Sean Strickland's going to walk forward. He's going to try to cut off the cage. And if his chin stays afloat, he could have the ability to land some decent shots on Adesanya, look to pressure him, and potentially look to sway minutes that way. However, in a 25-minute kickboxing affair, that doesn't matter. He's going to lose the optics. Adesanya has more weapons, and Adesanya has the home crowd and judges behind him. How does Strickland have success here? Well, it's going to come in the grappling. And the problem is we haven't really seen him utilize it in the past. I guess we're kind of seeing him trading it more recently, but without really any evidence of him using it, it comes down to a big risk. It comes down to a if and or but situation, one that I guess you could bet on, but one where without further evidence of it, you can't do it with much conviction. So sure, give me Sean Strickland on DraftKings because aside from Pereira, will knock out anybody. He's a pretty solid, durable guy who at 6.5K will walk forward, look to land damage, and if you're struggling for underdogs, he could be a decent guy and go out there and have some success over a 25-minute sample. But when it's picking a winner, there's no question who it should be. There's no question who this card's built around in Australia. There's no question what fight they want to make with Dricus du Plessis. So there's no reason why not to pick Adesanya in this matchup. I do think he has finish upside. I do think he has the ability to win this matchup here. But man, there's so many more things behind it. The Picks Adesanya, let's put it that way. But can we afford him at 9.7? It's hard to say yes, because at 9.7, even when he's winning these fights, he scored 102 against Costa, 106 against Whitaker. These aren't enough to go out there and outscore the people around him. Even in some wins where he's scoring 75 against the second Whitaker fight, 84 against Vettori, without takedown upside, if he doesn't get a finish here, he doesn't necessarily have the volume or the wrestling upside or the control time to score that high to make up for at 9.7. So it's really hard for me to get to him. Do I think he's safe? Yeah, great cash play. Get to him at 9.7 on cash. But GBP-wise, is he going to make optimal without an early finish or without a ton of volume? Probably not. And for that reason, I'd rather play the Ulbergs, the Radtkes, the Tafas, and target it that way. I'd even rather have almost Strickland at this point because his GBP ceiling is takedowns, pressure and volume, and good success. But for picking a raw winner, I think Adesanya wins. I just don't know if he lives up to his price tag at 9.7 on DraftKings. But give me Izzy. Should be a hopefully fun matchup. I hope Strickland makes it competitive. And I'd love to see him wrestle just for the fun of it. But we'll see what we get Saturday. It's built around Adesanya. He's my pick to win. But that's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Let me quickly run through my quick picks. I'm taking Adesanya, taking the dog in Tuivasa, taking Manel Kape, Justin Tafa, Anton Turkalij in a true 50-50 fight, Carlos Ulberg, Jack Jenkins, Jamie Mullarkey, Nasrat Haqparast, Charlie Radtke, Gabriel Miranda, and Kevin Jousset. On DraftKings, GPP-wise, my favorite targets are going to be Ulberg, Radtke, Tafa up top. Down low, I love Miranda, I love Tuivasa, and then I do think there's a ton of upside in the Turkalij Pedro fight, Jousset Crosbie fight, and Jung Miranda fight. If you want to get super risky, Strickland and Jung, although I don't see them winning at a high clip, their path to victories also score well. Betting-wise, what do I have locked in so far? I have 3 units on Carlos Ulberg at minus 132. That was parlayed last week with Shadiaya. If you're looking to make some NFL parlays, I think the Commanders win. Check out the NFL Bell with Lou and Wiz. Hopefully they'll give you someone to parlay Ulberg with if you want to go that route. I do have a bet on Anton Turkalij at plus 115 when it was still plus money. At chalk, don't think so. Maybe live entries on Turkalij instead. I'm going to be betting the under in the Miranda Jung fight. I also have Tafa and Lane under 1.5 parlay with a Dana White Contender Series bet. And I'll probably be betting Tai Tuivasa at a big underdog price tag as well. Reignmakers, the final thing on our agenda this weekend. Highest ceilings, Radtke, Ulberg, Tafa, winner of Turkalij Pedro, winner of Jung Miranda. Those are 5 I'm looking to target. Something to get a bit different, take Tuivasa down low, maybe rely on some upside of Manel Kape as a contrarian play compared to the chalkier Ulberg and Radtkes. But that's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. As I mentioned before, help me get to 1,000. Hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, show some love. If you have any questions or concerns, please leave it in the comment section down below. I'll be happy to answer your questions there. And finally, check me out on Twitter, at GamblesGordo, where I'll be posting my final slate of bets Friday afternoon. Show some love there, as I'm also getting close to 4K followers there as well. But I wish everyone the best of luck in your betting endeavors this week. And hopefully this video has given you enough insight into how you're going to target this from a DraftKings and a betting perspective at UFC 293. And with that, guys, enjoy the fights. Let's make some money.